Well, polycrisis is the new word that I've discovered and loved. It's a word that was determined by Adam Tooze, who's a professor at Columbia. I think he came up with this a few years ago. So a polycrisis is a situation where you have individual discrete crises which are simultaneous, and then they intensify as they collide with one another, resulting in dire and deadly disruptions. And we are in a situation in this world now where we have we're in a polycrisis situation, and the polycrisis include climate change, global inflation, food and energy shortages, Russian invasion of Ukraine, China under Xi Jinping and what may happen with Taiwan, U.S.-China decoupling and the Cold War that could come, the potential unraveling of the democratic system in the United States.
Is there anything else?
It's not North Korea. North Korea is not, when you put it in the scope of things and you ask, North Korea is not really a polycrisis because, as you mentioned, this goes on and on and on all the time. And yes, we don't certainly want to see, North Korea lobbing, missiles, but do we really think that North Korea will do a first strike nuclear attack against South Korea, Japan, potentially the United States? We don't. Why? Because in the words of the U.S. and South Korea defense officials, after these attacks, right? If there were a first strike, this would result in the end of the Kim Jong-un regime by the overwhelming and decisive response of the alliance. So on my list of things that I worry about, North Korea lobbing missiles is probably 10 or 11, unfortunately.
Well, you probably wouldn't say that if you lived in South Korea or Japan, I suspect. But does it relate to that point, Steve? Great word, polycrisis. And to Glenn's point, because of those issues around the polycrisis, it hasn't had the attention that otherwise it might have had. What is that the reason why he's done it? Why now? Why now?
Oh, well, he did it now for a very clear reason, and that's because the U.S. and South Korea just had one of their largest scale military exercises over the last few years or so. They had 1,600 U.S. and South Korean flights, 240 warplanes. Donald Trump put an end to these when he was trying to negotiate, unsuccessfully, of course, with Kim Jong-un to get the North Koreans to give up their nuclear program.
Right.
So those failed. And it hurt U.S. and South Korea, readiness. And so you need to be ready. You need to be able to show North Korea that if you do strike, we are ready to come in and, and retaliate in a way that you will not survive. That's why these exercises are so important. This is Kim Jong-un's response to those exercises. He's done it in the past. He'll do it again, but you've got to keep these exercises going so we don't get the nuclear strike. And the worse these crises intersect with one another, the more difficult it becomes to enforce those types of red lines. And that's why the Russian invasion of Ukraine is increasing, right, other crises that we have, of the food shortage, the energy, an energy crisis, immigration, which is causing a lot of the issues that in the UK. And now you're having an immigration problem coming out of Ukraine. How long is that going to last? Are you going to be able to take in all these Ukrainian refugees when winter comes and energy is so expensive, if it's available at all? So yeah, that's where all these crises intersect and why a polycrisis is so dangerous. Look, governments can handle one crisis. The United States, handled the Civil War. I mean, obviously, more people died in that war in the U.S. than in like all other wars combined. But the U.S. came out of the Civil War. The U.S. came out of the Great Depression. The U.S. comes out and the whole world comes out of World War II. Coming out of the polycrisis we have now is much more difficult.